Hello, Patriots. I'm Lee Watts, and this is Patriot Point, your source for news and analysis from a conservative, Christian, and common sense point of view. This week, we'll be looking at the potential dangers of a Kamala Harris presidency. It's not about the open border. You think the border is open now, the floodgates are going to open if she gets in. You think the economy is bad now, we could be looking at a second Great Depression if she gets in. But specifically this week, we're going to be looking at the great threat she poses to our Second Amendment rights. She has talked, and we've got her caught on tape. I'm going to show you several clips of her this week, and each time it's just going to blow your mind. This first clip was where she is talking about mandatory buybacks of weapons. Mandatory means we're going to come take it from you. And if you don't, they'll send somebody to come take it, or they might impose a fine or some kind of tax. And then you're in trouble, not because you didn't give your weapons up, because you didn't pay your taxes or these fines. So first of all, don't take my word for it. Let's listen out of her own mouth talking about how she does support a mandatory buyback program.
Assault weapons that are already in circulation. What do you do about those?
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
Do you believe in the mandatory buyback of quote-unquote assault weapons? And whether or not you do, how does that idea not go against fundamentally the Second Amendment?
Great question. I do believe that we need to do buyback. I'll tell you, when elected president, if the United States Congress continues to fail to have the courage to do something about this, I'm prepared to take executive action and put in place a ban on the importation of assault weapons into our country. But we still have to deal with the over 2 million assault weapons that are currently in the streets of America. And so a buyback program is a good idea.
So yes, she wants to do a mandatory thing, and she keeps using the word assault weapon. Well, that's not clearly defined. Over in Australia, they did a mandatory buyback program, and that went so far as to include shotguns. Now, this is what she's talked about in the past, but even this week, while on the presidential campaign trail, she's talking how she wants to do 3 different things to restrict your Second Amendment rights. And let's play that clip for you right now.
And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban.
So you notice she said she wanted to do 3 specific things. First of all, she wanted to do background checks. Now that sounds very benign at first until you realize these background checks mean, hey, if you attend certain Patriot meetings, then you're not allowed to get a gun. If you have certain positions on the issues, if you've posted certain things on social media, you're potentially dangerous. And they could prevent that through that kind of a background check, which ties right into our second thing, institute red flag laws. We fought against these in Kentucky. We've kept them out of the state. She might do this on a national level through executive order. And this says we think you might potentially commit a crime later. So to make sure you don't do that, we're not going to let you have a weapon now. Even though no crime has actually been committed, a great assault upon our Second Amendment rights. Then she also said she wanted to do an assault weapons ban. I'd like to remind everybody it was in the year 1774. When King George says, I'm going to ban assault weapons being shipped into the colonies and also ban the importation of ammunition. And of course, 2 years later, we went to war over that. She keeps saying how she's going to give Congress 100 days to implement these things. And if they don't, she will do it by executive order. Now, of course, this is incredibly unconstitutional. Joe Biden is no friend to the people who love the Second Amendment. He's been against gun rights for his whole career. However, I want to play this next clip for you. This is amazing. This is a clip from one of the 2020 Democratic primary debates. And you're going to see they're talking about these executive orders to take away guns. Joe Biden is saying, hey, this is unconstitutional. You can't do this. But Kamala Harris is like, yes, I will. And when Joe Biden goes so far as to say, this is unconstitutional, you need to rein it in, that's really going somewhere. So let's look again where she is now saying in that debate how she's going to do it, even though it's unconstitutional.
They said, I'm going to issue an executive order. Biden saying there's no constitutional authority to issue that executive order when they say I'm going to eliminate assault weapons, saying you can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, Instead of saying, no, we can't, let's say, yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a
And
constitution.
yes, we can.
Again, right out of her own mouth. Even Joe Biden said such an executive order to take away these things through mandatory confiscations is unconstitutional. She says she's still going to do it. So that's the great dangers that we have. Now, of course, you might be thinking, well, we have the United States Supreme Court, and they would step in and they would block things like this. I'd like to remind everybody of something. Two of the most conservative judges that we have on the Supreme Court right now. First of all, you got Clarence Thomas. He is 76 years old. So the chances of him retiring during the next president's term, pretty high. We also have Samuel Alito. He is 74 years old. So there's also a very good chance during the next president's term that Supreme Court justice would retire. So, and then if you replace those two with younger people who are anti-gun, this is going to affect our gun rights for generations. And as Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky said, don't give your rights away to the government today and expect them to give them back tomorrow. And Senator Paul was quite correct in that. We're going to see Kamala repeatedly talks about how people have been traumatized over gun violence or just the threat of gun violence. And there's all kinds of clips talking about how, oh, you've been traumatized over this. And here we see one of the Democrats' tactics. They want to impose laws or executive orders because of feelings instead of facts. And here's some of the facts of the matter. We have some of the cities in America who have the absolute worst gun crimes going on and gun violence are cities like New York City and Chicago, which have the strictest anti-gun laws in the country, proving to us these laws don't restrict crime. It actually makes the criminals a little more bold because the law-abiding citizens are the only ones that have been disarmed. Here's another fact for you. If the government comes to me and says, hey, you've got 3 guns, you need to give us 2 of them. So if they say, if I've got 3 and they take away 2, then how many do I have? 1? No, I got a bunch more. No way I'm telling them how many I've really got. Now, what is the purpose of having actually one of these things she is pushing, which is a national gun registry? She's pushing that hard. The Democrats have been pushing that for years. The reason for that is we know who has it and how many they have when we come to get them. Let me give you a quote from Janet Reno. She was the Attorney General during the Clinton administration about what their tactic really is. Waiting periods are only a step. Registration is only a step. The prohibition of private firearms is the goal. So you see all these things that she is pushing, talking about, hey, we need red flag laws, registrations, all these things. Their ultimate goal is to completely disarm the American people. And I believe this is one of the absolute greatest threats of a Kamala Harris presidency. I really like the words of Charlton Heston, that great actor. Al Gore, former vice president, he had threatened this same thing to say, hey, we're going to take your guns away. But listen to the great words of Charlton Heston about that.
The divisive forces that would take freedom away. I want to say those fighting words for everyone within the sound of my voice to hear and to heed, and especially for you, Mr. Gore. From my cold, dead hands.
Yes, great words from Charlton Heston. Government, you're free to take my guns out of my cold, dead hands because you're not getting them otherwise. So here raises an important question as we come to the conclusion today is, why do we have the Second Amendment? I think one of the beautiful quotes that would perfectly explain why do we have the Second Amendment is a quote from the guy who was the author of the Declaration of Independence and one of our presidents, Thomas Jefferson. Notice what President Jefferson said. The beauty of the Second Amendment is that it will not be needed until they try to take it away. So we see here the perfect explanation for the Second Amendment. You have Jefferson saying you won't need to have guns until they try to take your gun rights away. And who is the only person that could try to do that? Would be our own government. The purpose of the Second Amendment was specifically so the people would not be oppressed by their own government. So some people will say, and Kamala and Biden are really fond of this, saying, well, you don't need an assault weapon. For this, I like to give this final example tonight. It talks about a lady named Mrs. Rosa Parks. It was in the year 1955. She sat in the front of the bus when in that point in history, the law said she was supposed to sit in the back of the bus. Well, let me ask everybody a question. Did Mrs. Parks on that famous day have a need to sit on the front of the bus to get to wherever she was going on that day? No, there was no need to get there. The back of the bus went around town just like the middle and the front of the bus did. So she had no need to sit in the front of the bus. But she had a right to sit in the front of the bus. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you might think I don't have a need for my assault weapon. Well, you know what? It is my right to have the most advanced military-grade assault weapon because that's what Americans used first to actually found our country and win our freedoms. There's a lesson I teach on biblical principles about the Second Amendment, principles about weapons. If you would like to get this video of this lesson, it's available on my website, which is leewatsusa.com. there on the store page. So if you'd like to get that, I hope that would be a blessing to you. So I believe that's one of the greatest threats of a Kamala Harris presidency. Not just a crashed economy, not just wide open borders, but this attack upon our basic constitutional rights. I hope this gets you fired up. Maybe you can contact some people who were considering voting for her and show them some of these clips where she's on the record saying she's going to mandate this, do it by executive order. Some really scary stuff. Let's do everything we can to keep her out of the White House. Well, that's the news for this week. So until next week, Patriots, I'm Lee Watts for Patriot Point, reminding you that liberty is not a spectator sport.
From my cold